All right, let's just dive right in. We are about to go on a journey, a really deep one, into India's ancient past. And I'm not talking about the past of kings and empires you might already know. Nope, we're going way further back into a past that is almost entirely unwritten.
And that right there is the central question we're tackling today. If you really want to understand the foundations of a civilization, you have to ask, what happened before the written word? Who were the very first people, and how on earth did they live?
And right away, we hit a huge roadblock. See, the vast majority of humanity's story, it was never written down. There are no ancient texts, no chronicles, no scrolls to tell us what happened in this distant era, so where do we even start looking for answers? Well, if we can't use words, what's left? We have to look at the things our ancestors actually made, the things they used and the things they left behind. By following the trail of their technology, their tools, we can start to piece together the story of how they survived, how they adapted, and eventually how they built the world we live in today.
And it's so important to get your head around the sheer scale of this. Written history, the part of our past we can actually read about, is just a tiny, tiny sliver of the whole human story. Prehistory. Well, that's everything else, that immense, silent ocean of time that shaped who we are long before anyone even thought about writing it all down.
So we know our mission, follow the trail of tools. But hang on, who were the people actually making these tools? Before we jump into their toolkit, we have to touch on a really fundamental debate. Where did modern humans in India, and honestly everywhere else, actually come from in the first place?
This is such a great example of how prehistory is basically detective work. On one side, you've got the radiation theory, which looks at DNA evidence and says, hey, it looks like we all came from a single starting point. But then, on the other side, you have the parallel evolution theory, which looks at fossils and argues we might have evolved in different parts of the world at the same time. It's a fascinating debate that shows how we use objects and biology, not books, to figure out our deepest roots.
Okay, now let's get back to those tools. We're going to start at the very beginning, in the oldest and, by far, the longest chapter of the human story, the Paleolithic Age. You might also know it as the Old Stone Age.
And when I say long, I really mean it. We are talking about a period of time that lasted for nearly 300,000 years. I mean, just try to wrap your head around that. It's an almost unimaginable stretch of time where humanity's main goal, day in and day out, was just survive. The absolute genius of this first toolkit is in its simplicity. These weren't complex machines or anything. They were basically hand-sized tools made by cleverly flaking off pieces of hard rock like quartzite to create a sharp edge. That's it. And that simple act of creating an edge for cutting or scraping, that's the very beginning of all technology.
So what does a toolkit like this let you do? Well, it supports a very specific way of life. These people were hunter-gatherers. They were always on the move, hunting animals and gathering whatever edible plants they could find. And we have incredible sites like Bhimbetka and the Soan Valley that give us a real window into this ancient nomadic world.
So after hundreds of thousands of years of survival, something big happened. The climate started to change. And as the world changed, well, so did we. This brings us to the Mesolithic, or Middle Stone Age, a really critical time of adaptation and incredible innovation.
The defining technology of this new era was the microlith, these tiny, beautifully crafted stone artifacts. This move towards making things smaller was a massive leap forward. It allowed for so much more precision and versatility. The best way to think of it is like this. Humanity basically went from using a sledgehammer to using a scalpel. It's a huge deal. And this is a perfect example of how one new piece of tech can completely change the game. Suddenly, these tiny microliths made hunting smaller animals and even fishing possible. They were probably used as the very first tips for bows and arrows. And with these new, more reliable food sources, people started to settle in one place for longer, and they took the very first baby steps toward domesticating animals and planting seeds. A massive shift was happening.
And that little shift leads us to what is maybe the single greatest transformation in all of human history, the Neolithic Age and the invention of agriculture. Seriously, this wasn't just another step. This was a revolution that changed our planet forever.
See, agriculture kicked off this incredible chain reaction. Once you figure out how to cultivate plants and domesticate animals for food, you don't have to wander around anymore. And if you don't have to wander, you can build permanent homes, and that leads to villages. And with a stable food supply, people finally have time to develop new skills and crafts.
Just try to picture this brand new world they built.
Instead of temporary grass huts, they're living in permanent houses made of mud brick. Their stone tools are now finely polished and more efficient. They're using the wheel, not for transport just yet, but to create pottery. For the first time, they're growing crops like wheat and rice, and weaving their own clothes from cotton and wool. This is the blueprint of the settled world we all recognize today.
But, of course, the innovation didn't stop there. Our final chapter of prehistory is the one that serves as the bridge to the great ancient civilizations. So welcome to the Chalcolithic Age, the dawn of metal.
Now, this new age didn't just appear overnight. The Chalcolithic was a long period of transition, a true copper-stone age. For centuries, people kept using their trusted stone tools right alongside this amazing new material they had discovered, copper.
And then came the next great leap. Someone, somewhere, figured out that if you mix that copper with another metal, tin, you create something far stronger and more durable than anything that had ever existed before. That new alloy was bronze, and it was a complete game changer, making better tools, better weapons, and opening up a world of new possibilities.
And this is where our deep dive into the unwritten past ends, right on the doorstep of written history. Because this new metal technology wasn't just some cool idea, it was the foundation for one of the world's first great urban civilizations, right here in India. The magnificent cities of the Harappan culture were built on the back of this incredible Chalcolithic revolution.
So, think about it. We've gone from simple stone flakes all the way to the revolutionary power of bronze. The entire blueprint for civilization has now been laid out, which leaves us with one final, tantalizing question. With the power of metal now in their hands, what would humanity build next?